Why are men struggling so much in the modern world?
Because of our primate origins, but we never cease being primates. We carry our primate heritage with us to the extent that we do not transcend that primate heritage. We're stuck with it. I've done a lot of research on primate ethology and evolutionary psychology, and I'm convinced that politically, we are chimpanzees predominantly. Socially, we are a mix of chimpanzee and bonobo. The male drive to protect, to defend, to provision almost certainly evolved. It was part of our universal ancestor along the ape line. I think human males have been enormously thwarted in modern society. And it's not just modern society, it's actually postmodern society. I just think that men now are stuck with the problem of what to do. If you're looking for a general explanation of what's wrong with men, it's that they've been left standing in the grass on the savannah, not able anymore and not wanted. So the culture says, not wanted as protectors, defenders, and provisioners, to be the man within that is full and strong. And when you manifest that, at least to a certain degree, from doing the inner work of integrating the shadow forms of king, warrior, magician, lover, for example, guess what happens? You suddenly become.
Okay, Douglas, welcome to the show. Now, to get started, you've been on quite a winding road in your career, and you've branched into many different areas. But something I heard you say that really jumped out at me was that you've always been trying to understand the origins of things. Seems to be a common thread, you know. So could you maybe comment on this? And maybe a broader question here is, do you think that everybody has this sort of like, it's almost like a source code, like it's something that is kind of directing them? I was just curious to get your thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
Um, yeah, I don't know where the enthusiasm, interest, fascination, etc., it comes from to seek the origins of things. But for as long as I can remember, and I can remember things back to 2 years old and even some earlier. I don't know where it comes from, but it's I've always been interested in the origins of the cosmos, of our species, of life, of psychological issues, of spiritual systems, I mean, ancient civilizations as you know, because we are what we are and where we are in time and space because of the origins. And the origins of things, while human beings as individuals, but also societies and cultures and so forth, do evolve over time. They never, in my view, uh, they never ditch or dismiss or in any way they can try, but they never lose that origin. It's always present no matter how much modulation and modification there is. So that's one thing. And do I think that all people have? I, and by the way, I do think, as far as I can have experienced and can think about it, I think the origin of things is supracosmic psyche or spirit. But anyway, I don't know if everybody, you know, one thing I joke with my classes about sometimes is I'm going to take my shelf of developmental psychology books, take them out in the backyard and burn them, because it's become so clear to me by now that in the nature versus nurture thing, that nature is 85%. And so there's your origin for you. I mean, how how we are born with different temperaments, different proclivities, different interests that are originally in baby form, but they develop in life if we're given a chance to. So I don't know. I to the extent that we are all, in my view, uh, well, connected, uh, that as we descend in the psyche from the individual, like the peak of a wave, we go down into eventually the collective unconscious, where all things are, including all interests, all temperaments, all and mediated, of course, by the genes in some way that is poorly understood so far, and other things. I mean, I do think that there are spirit influences on maybe even in the womb or before, but so one answer I would give to your question is everybody born with this somewhere. Yes, in the sense that we're all connected to the deep and supra consciousness. But do many people realize it or become conscious of it in their lives? I don't think many do.
Interesting. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. I'm going to read you a quote now, and I'd love to get your comments on it. So the quote is, "Life is a kind of sowing time and the harvest is not yet here." And that's from Vincent van Gogh.
Right.
What are your thoughts on this quote?
I love it. I use it a lot. Um, it's pretty clear to me that uh, while there is no answer to the question why are we here or what are we doing here that satisfies me completely. Uh, the feeling I have is that indeed, I mean, this is a soul growing environment if it's allowed to be. And of course, much of it does not allow for soul growth. But for those who are fortunate enough to have the opportunity, this is a place, space, whatever dimension in which to grow and enrich the soul. And in the process of doing that, we are seeding or sowing ourselves, but also others. And um, and that's all we get to do, is sow the seeds. The harvest is not here. I mean, there are peeks at it and bits and pieces of it, but if we're looking for a comprehensive or full or wholeness making harvest, it is not here.
When I heard you talk about this, it reminds me of the image of the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper
Mm,
is always holding the scythe, the harvesting tool, and it's almost like it's very symbolic of a bigger picture, that
yeah, yeah.
perhaps our conscious experiences here are being, I don't know, uploaded in some kind of way after this or something like that.
I think they're being uploaded every nanosecond. I mean, I think everything is being downloaded, uploaded like that. Uh, and I also think that probably at biological death or shortly thereafter, we are allowed, or the system is set up so that we can experience uh, our lives, our biological lives in this dimension, in a full and whole way. Um, and in that sense, too, we're harvested. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a process that who knows what the end of it is, but I believe the end of it is benevolent. I think it is just wondrous. Now, tied with that is the ancient Greek and of course the Eastern business of reincarnation. How many lives does it take? Because to become whole. And another way to look at it is in my view, is from one of my spiritual heroes, Ibn al-Arabi, Sufi Islam mystic, the greatest mystic, often he's called in Islam, who envisions way stations, a whole series of way stations, which can be interpreted, some of them are here, but beyond this life. Because I think most people, maybe everybody, no, or I should say, nobody gets to experience themselves and others in this short span of human life here in their fullness. Which, by the way, I think is one reason why attempts to become the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover in their fullness, I mean, we should try as men, and women have corresponding archetypal guidance, but we're not going to make it in one lifetime. And the reason I think there are lives that are us in some way beyond this dimension of reality, rather than, or not rather than, but in addition to, or whatever, reincarnation here, is that the fullness, wholeness, whatever that for example, the Hindus and Buddhists talk about, I haven't met anyone yet who's achieved that here. And maybe I just haven't been lucky enough, but I don't see that the project of soul making gets completed here.
For sure, for sure. And okay, so you mentioned there, king, warrior, magician, lover, and this is a framework that you and your colleague Roger Moore developed years ago, decades ago, actually, and it's had a huge influence on the culture. Before we get into that, we are arguably in a crisis of masculinity at the moment. Like 75 to 80% of suicides are from men, which is just shocking. There's clearly a problem with the culture we now live in. So I was curious to get your thoughts on, like, what do you think is driving that? Like, why is that suicide rate so high? Like, why are men struggling so much in the modern world?
Yeah, okay. It's going to take me a couple minutes. Sorry.
Take your time. No rush.
Okay. I because of our primate origins, which origins again, but we never cease being primates. I mean, there's this whole other thing that sets us apart from even our closest relatives, the chimpanzees and bonobos, that allows us to look at higher dimensions and experience those. But having said that, we carry our primate heritage with us to the extent that we do not transcend it, and we can't ever do that fully, but to the extent that we do not transcend that primate heritage, we're stuck with it. And this is how that feeds in. Because I've done a lot of research on primate ethology and evolutionary psychology, and I'm convinced that politically we are chimpanzees predominantly. Socially, we are a mix of chimpanzee and bonobo. And if I can explain what that is and so forth, but the male drive to protect, to defend, to provision almost certainly evolved. I mean, it was part of the our universal ancestor along the ape line. I'm sure of that because it shows up in different ways than the different apes. But I think it really came online in a big way for humans when about 1.6, 1.8 million years ago, our ancestors, our specific ancestors in the primate lineage, began walking upright in the savannas of Africa. They left the jungle. The jungle was leaving them, was receding, and it took the ancestors of the chimpanzees and bonobos with it. But our ancestors stayed as the climate changed. And so our physical beings changed, but so did our psychology. And I'm talking about neural architecture, almost certainly in the brain. So while in what I'll call jungle time, males and females foraged pretty much independently. That's like bonobos and chimpanzees. On the savannah, however, it's theorized, and there are lots of indicators that this is probably was the case. The females gathered, the males hunted, and so there was a division of labor, and the females burdened with children on their backs or on one hip could not defend, and there was a lot to defend against or provision a high protein diet. So they got tied down with kids. And I love kids. It's not a dissing of children at all. It's just a fact. And the males evolved for cooperative hunting, but in the early stages, cooperative defense. Because I haven't been to Africa, but I've seen a lot of nature shows. And when lions, cheetahs, and other things are charging, you better be able to get out of the way fast and get up a tree. So I think modern society and the males, defended as the women were retreating up into the trees, and then they got up as fast as they could. So I think males have been, human males have been enormously thwarted in modern society. And it's not just modern society, it's actually postmodern society. There's been a lot of social engineering taking place, attempting to, I'm not against feminism at all. I'm for it. However, it's not the way we have handled as a species the granting of power to females, to women, power, opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're going back to jungle time, where the females and the males foraged separately and could support themselves. But what do we do with the savannah time part of us as men? Protector, defender, provisioner. It doesn't seem to be wanted anymore. And it gets excluded. Okay, for every revolution, there is a price to be paid. It's just the truth. For every social innovation, there is a price to be paid. And the price, in this case, of equality, there should be equality between the sexes, but it's also true that we are not, males and females, interchangeable parts. We're not. So I'm not at all anti-feminist. I just think that men now are stuck with the problem of what to do with the fact that women are headed back to foraging days in the jungle and the men are left standing in the tall grass on the savannah. It's like, well, what are we good for? I mean, I'm almost 77 years old. I started a family late. Our daughter, who's almost 29, I largely raised her. I mean, my wife and I are together and very happy, but I was the one that did most of that raising of her. And both my wife and I, but me especially, have heard and heard and heard and heard and heard from her the alienation of the genders, the mutual alienation of the genders. And I mean, from junior high school at least on. And so, why are they so alienated? It's because there's this shift back to jungle time, and males are in savannah time as far as our evolutionary development is concerned. And as the alienation has grown, so has the hostility between males and females, and anxiety about each other. And now we have social media that makes dating apps not helpful, but extremely dangerous. I mean, it's like we're just going further and further and further apart. And so I would say what's wrong with, everybody's an individual and handles things differently. But if you're looking for a general explanation of what's wrong with men, it's that they've been left standing in the grass on the savannah, not able anymore and not wanted. So the culture says, not wanted as protectors, defenders, and provisioners. Okay, but in a way, that's disingenuous, because many women under the surface also have that savannah time instinct. It's not like you can get rid of any of there we are with origins again. You can't get rid of them. If you scratch the surface, you will find that many women, yes, they want self-fulfillment, independence. Yes, they do not want to be put in a box of homemaker and so forth. I don't blame them at all. But they still yearn for, not all women, I'm not saying this, all populations are bell curves. So, but many women, I know this from our daughter and her friends, yearn for the protector, defender, provisioner male. So there's a heavy dose of dishonesty going on.
Okay. This is a huge idea, and I appreciate how you're treading very carefully here as well, which which you have to do in the modern world.
Yeah.
So we're sort of saying that due to our time in the savannah, we by necessity, we developed almost a biological drive to protect, defend, and provide. And
Mm-hmm.
in the modern world, we don't get a chance to exercise those drives, and that is getting a lot of men down. So if that's
Yeah.
the case, then what's the implication for the man listening to this that knows he has these drives and maybe is not currently able to exercise them? Like, what would you suggest to that person about how to do this in a healthy way?
Um, First answer is, I don't know. Second answer is, um, it's going to depend on the individual, what they can find to do. Third answer is, um, look within, work with individually, one-on-one with a depth psychologist to see how you can work with those Savannah time drives within yourself to integrate them into your. Yeah, I mean, that's hard. It's hard. It's easier said than done because the society doesn't support it, of course. But do what you can in men's groups, in various forms of counseling and so forth, but especially depth psychology, to be the man within that is full and strong. And when you manifest that, at least to a certain degree, from doing the inner work of integrating the shadow forms of king, warrior, magician, lover, for example, guess what happens? You suddenly become an attractor for those who want, consciously, semi-consciously, unconsciously, for you to be the defender, the protector, the provisioner in some way. And a lot of times the provisioning, it doesn't have to be economic. That can be modulated and changed into emotional provisioner. That's the king, framer, orderer, a place that people can go, including women, to feel safe and protected. The place being your psychological space. Having said that, beyond all of that, I do think that society will, not in its current vicious, even psychotic rebellion against the changes, which I think we're experiencing here in the United States right now. But I think that we will get to the point, because we'll have to, because origins are never escaped. We will get to the point where these things eventually balance out and work out well enough so that men can reassume, and women reassume a something that is not patriarchy, but it's also not matriarchy. I know that doesn't do the individual man right here, right now, listening much good to realize society will eventually, our cultures will eventually modulate all this, because they will have to. They will have to, because of the inherent instinctual drives. But I would say inner work with competent guides, counselors, therapists, etc., who are clued into, that's why I say depth psychology, the inner work that men need to do. On the other hand, women need to be doing inner work too, to come to truth about themselves and their inherent natures. There's no good way, in my view, for terribly unhappy men, frustrated, angry, don't know what's happened to them, don't know how to get it right, or come back into their social roles that they had before, to try to do it the way it is being done in some cultures and countries now is brutal, vicious, increases the distance between people, and in some cases males and females. I mean, to say, for example, as a prominent politician did a year or so ago, I'm going to protect women whether they like it or not. doesn't work. In fact, it's insane. The so individual men. Well, the only thing, this is my answer for or whatever. Look, read King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and work with someone who's aware of these things. Also, take a look at my. You can still get it. Book Primal Love. It's old, it's out of print, but it is available because there I talk about this stuff in a lot more detail, and I do have some detailed suggestions. But if the society won't allow you to express those Savannah time drives, you can work with that yourself and become a magnet for those, if it's heterosexual or not, become a magnet for those who need a space in which to feel protected, provisioned, at least emotionally, and so forth. That's the best I can do right now.
Okay. Okay. So for anybody that isn't aware of the framework, could you maybe just give us a brief, big picture overview of what are the archetypes? King, warrior, magician, lover. How would you explain this to
Yeah,
someone?
yeah. As Robert and I worked with this system, which was originally his brainchild, but he wanted a partner to work with and develop it further and so forth. And it turned out to be me. Okay, so as we worked with it, we realized if you get down to maybe it's not the bottom, but close to the bottom, the core stuff, there are lots of archetypes in the human psyche, but there seem to be four basic ones. And men who hear this immediately, most men immediately feel the truth of it. There certainly is warrior energy in most men. Again, all populations are bell curves, but and that's the competitive, the fight, it's a lot more than that, but it's drive, the desire to compete. I mean, why are what amount to blood sports so popular, like football and soccer, and okay, so I mean, not just popular, but they drive people crazy. Actually, that is that warrior stuff. Um, the magician is probably the hardest one to get into for many men, but the magician is many, many things. But thinking, exploring, researching, technician types, engineers, I mean, but also the philosophers and theologians, and it's all thinking stuff at its base. And you have to strategize and think and plan to lay sidewalk. Let's just say that. So that's magician energy. A lot of managers and at all levels and so forth are expressing a lot of magician energy. Lover energy is what it sounds like. It is partly sexual, and it's also more expansive than that. It's empathy, the capacity to, it's intuition, it's feeling connected and at one with greater and greater aspects of reality too. And so, loving in the immediate. And by the way, the sexual part, from my perspective, is often misunderstood as lover. It is lover, but you better not count on the sexual part to build a lasting relationship. And a lot of people get disenchanted, men and women, with their longer term relationships because the sexual part is not as exciting as it was at first. Beyond lust is love. And so while lust is a part of it, in intimate relationships, it's often the entree, often, not always, but it's the lover appreciating the other and so forth. The king energy, king is what all men want to be. But they misunderstand if they think that it's a social position. It may be political or social position. It may be that, but the energy does not necessarily create social positions. In fact, social positions like presidents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, often are not accessing king energy well. Just, it's mostly framing the king energy, framing one's own life, perhaps framing other lives, standing back, drawing on the warrior energy, magician energy, lover energy, and presenting a firm but empathic male.
Okay, okay, this is so interesting. A quick follow-up question about, the king energy, and you're sort of saying that it's you don't get that by acquiring a social position, like some kind of status as a
Right,
leader or whatever.
right.
Do you think that if someone is, say, deficient in king energy, that they will be the ones that most crave the power because it's missing from their lives, and they think unconsciously, if I get that powerful position, then I'll feel like the king energy that I'm missing.
I think unconsciously they do think that. I think a lot of us uh, compete for power, status, wealth, etc., in the mistaken belief that those things will make us whole or happy or satisfied, uh, and they won't. I'm not saying there's a total disconnect between societal, cultural, political roles and the archetypes. But what I'm saying is that um, true to form, many human beings, maybe most, uh, either don't have the opportunities or the incentives or the interests, etc., to do the inner work that is necessary to express what it is they really want, which is wholeness, fullness, and so on. In the case of men, uh, masculine sense of masculine fullness. Instead of that, they go for external trappings like power, wealth, status. But in the psyche, there are no shortcuts. And if you try to do that, you will come out in many cases, instead of being a mature, firm, but benevolent and fructifying and framing king figure, you will become a tyrant. Tyrants are not what the king energy is about. That is part of the shadow of the king energy, that kind of behavior. Same goes for the warrior. If you think that hoo-ha and killing people is warrior energy, well, it is, but it's shadow warrior. It's the sadist. If you think that achieving a university position or a position in management of corporation, et cetera, in and of itself gives you access to the fullness of magician energy, you are wrong. You will be a jerk, a manipulator, and a liar. And if you think that going from one woman to another, to another, to another, in the case of heterosexuals, other stuff for those who aren't, will satisfy the lover energy, you are wrong. You will never be satisfied. You're addicted now. In the lover archetype, part of the shadow, one of the two halves of the shadow is the addicted lover. I was on the Geraldo Rivera show many, many years ago, Geraldo Rivera. And I was on with, was talking about King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and was on with Wilt Chamberlain. May he rest in peace. And what Geraldo wanted was, with that show, putting us together, he wanted me to analyze Wilt, because Wilt, by his own admission, had sex with 25,000 or whatever it was women, and thinking in my head, how is that even possible? I mean, how many a day does that, and I said to Wilt, I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to analyze you. He said, no, go ahead. According to the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover system. I said, okay, well, that is the addicted lover. And he said, yeah, that's right. I am. So what you want with the lover is not that. You want, although that's in the genetic code too, by the way, from our primate heritage, is for the males too. So not just the primates, but kind of all over in other species and groups. So there's seeds. But the other thing about Savannah time is that we began to really pair bond, usually male and female. That was for environmental reasons too. So there's the pair bond. Jungle time is still within us, and that's sow your seed as much as you can, and that's a real problem for the instinct for pair bonding. So again, these layers of animal being that we are, they just don't quite, it wasn't a smooth journey from the jungle to the city.
So are we sort of saying, Douglas, that there is these four energies, maybe more, but these kind of primary four energies, they all exist within us, and they can be dormant, they can be exercised, but we're sort of saying that we don't want to become overly identified with any particular one, and we want to sort of make sure that all four of them are flowing in balance in our lives, and we sort of want to be almost a center there that's kind of ensuring that we are getting a good flow. If that's the case, how best to approach that? Like how can people listening to this kind of create that optimal flow, would you say?
Well, again, everybody needs, you can't do it by yourself. You need a container, a framer, a guide, and call it a life guide, therapist, whatever would be optimal. Someone who's really clued into this stuff, as I said earlier. That's what I would seek out. And to the extent that, as primary, to the extent that men's groups are competently enough led, formed and led and guided and so forth, men's groups can be a supplemental aid. But and the task is to bring the two poles of the bipolar shadows of these archetypes together.
And sorry, could you just expand on what you mean by
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
bipolar shadows?
yeah. Each of the archetypes, the king archetype, for example, if you're if you're living mostly out of the shadow, it's what Robert and I called, you're either accessing or being possessed by the tyrant, in the case of the king, or the weakling or the abdicator, someone who abdicates his life, leaves the scene, doesn't, you know, and the warrior, if you're living out of the shadow, you will be either sadistic or masochistic. Masochistic is turning hostility toward inward toward yourself. If you're possessed by the bipolar shadow of the magician, you will be either a manipulator or or pretend to be innocent and naive and Pollyanna-ish. And the lover, the shadow, you'll either be addicted to a substance, to a way of thinking, to a way of life, to a gender thing, or you'll be impotent. You'll feel impotent. You feel, and I don't just mean sexually, I mean impotent about your own life. Nobody wants to be an archetype. That's another thing. Nobody should want to be an archetype, because that means being possessed. That means not being yourself. As you just said, Neil, there needs to be a strong enough, centered enough ego structure. The person we normally think of as ourselves needs to be strong enough to hold the center and working again with the spirit guide, shaman, whatever you're, holding that center, begin to pull these guys, the shadows, together, because the shadows together, what is the outcome of, for example, the middle ground between addiction and impotence? The middle ground is neither impotent nor addicted. And what would that be? That would be a mature lover. When I was doing life guiding and so forth, I would often help the people I was guiding to think of a meeting room or even a boardroom. The ego sits at the head of the table. The shadows and the sort of budding archetypes sit around at the side. The ego helps each to appreciate the other and welcomes the energies that they all bring. For example, a man who is feeling impotent about his life needs the warrior energy, So the warrior and the impotent aspects of ourselves need to be talking to each other, interrelating and appreciating each other. It's a, as you said, it's a balancing thing.
Yes.
And so I mean, there's a lot more to say.
Okay. I remember reading the book. It was recommended to me by a friend years ago. I remember reading it, and there was a journaling exercise in it that I did, and I found it really effective, actually. Um, are there any journaling exercises you've found to be powerful for kind of maybe dialoguing with these archetypes, or
Yes. Yeah.
getting into engagement with them?
Yeah. Called the active imagination dialogue. That along with other things helped me a lot to bring to the table aspects of the archetypes and other things, wounded childhood stuff that were really angry with me because, and so they were sabotaging my life projects because they have that power to do that. Angry with me because, for honest reasons and some dishonest, I had been repressing them. And somebody who wants to be part of the program being sidelined is not happy. So, yeah, with active imagination dialogue, you get alone in a quiet place, probably dim lights, with a notepad and a pen. You sort of calm yourself, you sort of, and then you write an invitation to whoever it is that you suspect within yourself is sabotaging you or angry with you. And it may take a while for them to show up or be willing to talk to you. Just like when you're trying to repair a friendship or a love relationship, it's the same dynamic. But eventually they probably will. And their response will not, and you'll be writing that too, their response will not be something that you are creating. You know the difference between if you're writing what you would like that part of you to say. But if it feels like it's coming up and it's flowing, it's almost like automatic writing. It writes itself. And then you respond, pen and paper, and then it responds. It may take a while to heal the bridge, and you, the ego, have to be sincere about wanting the input and the help of this repressed aspect of yourself. You have to be honest about it. You because shadow stuff is really sensitive to put-ons and personas and fake. It's really sensitive to that. It needs to, in order to feel safe and okay about trying to come back into relationship with you, the ego, it needs to feel that you mean it.
Okay, that's a really interesting exercise. Might give that a try. Um, I suppose maybe one of the last questions I wanted to ask, is it possible to get to a stage or a situation in your life where you can call upon these energies when needed? So, for example, if you're an athlete and you're about to go into a sports match and you're like, right, I want to bring warrior energy into this situation. Like, is it possible to consciously kind of to call that up? And the same thing with magician energy and king energy in particular. Any thoughts there? Like, if anything, have you found anything helpful for doing that in your own life?
Yes. First, yes, it is possible, and yes, it's been helpful in my own life. Um, uh, if I'm facing, if I, if I'm facing a potential conflict, for example, but I don't feel that up to it, to taking it on, I will kind of visually, but also verbally call on my warrior energy
Interesting.
to come be together with me and help me face this. When I have a lot of the responsibility for taking care of and raising our, from 3 months old to now, our 3-year-old granddaughter. And when I'm starting to feel irritated, as everybody does with kids at some point, I need to, I do envision and call upon my lover energy to be calm, take it slow, channel love, tenderness, wisdom too, for me in handling her. So there are hundreds and hundreds of life situations like that. Once you become conversant with and a good relationship with the archetypes in their fullness, not their shadow forms, which presumably you've had a chance to work on through various exercises that are in the book, but other things too, and with a competent shaman, spirit guide, therapist, analyst, whatever, then you do get to the point where they're accessible then. Then you, the ego, can call help. I need you to come in here and help me deal with this. Yeah.
Wow. So it's almost like you become like the conductor of the orchestra and you're sort of
Exactly.
calling it
Yeah,
in.
exactly. Well, as I say in the new book, Soul Making, I say very clearly, psyche, each psyche, and psyche more generally, is a multitude for each of us. We are never alone. We think we're alone in the house. Sometimes we're not. These other, just at this level, these other aspects of ourselves are want to help make our lives rich, full, successful, satisfying.
Percent. Okay. Maybe one last, with a couple minutes left, maybe one last question. Um, I've heard you say we already are what we are
Mm,
trying to
mm,
become.
mm.
What are your thoughts here?
I have 2 minutes to do it.
You do.
What I mean is, we exist in at least two modes, in my view. All of reality is layered. At a very high level, we are complete and always have been, are now, and always will be. For some reason, the process of creation or expression of reality, capital R, kind of like sediment settling in a lake, sifts and sorts into different levels of reality. And so at our level here, we are working on, usually unconsciously or semi-consciously, working on making what we always are in eternity, infinity, uh, making that here.
Hmm.
Um, is
I,
a lot more than
on,
2 minutes here, but
on earth as it is in heaven.
right, right. Which, as I said earlier in our talk, our conversation, uh, is not going to be fully achievable here because that's eternity, which means no time, everything all together at once. This is sequential, one moment after another. And that can never, it's probably to finish this up or we're going to open another whole universe here. Uh, it, Plato said, time is the moving image of eternity, which is no time, all time. Why it's like that, how it happens, I don't know. But I've become convinced through my own personal experiences that is how this thing is, reality, capital R.
For sure. What a what a note to end on. Time is the moving image of eternity. Wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Douglas, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Where can people learn more about you online? The books are Soul Making and King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and many more. Where would you
Yeah.
recommend them to get these?
You can look up uh, uh, podcasts with Douglas Gillette or YouTubes with Douglas Gillette. That's one thing. You can go to my website, which is managed by another guy who's sometimes with it and sometimes not. But anyway, and that's Douglas Gillette Creations.com. Or I'm going to offer my personal email because I do this ongoing teaching stuff and group discussion if anybody's interested. And the way to become involved in that is by email. So I do screen my emails, so it's like, if that's what you're interested in, please say that in the very first line, because otherwise I'll delete it, just get way too, like all of us, way too much stuff. So the email address is Gillette, D as in Douglas, GILLETTED at sbcglobal.net.
Okay. Let me just get that up again. Yeah, Gillette D at sbcglobal.net. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
there it is.
Okay, there's also a great series of podcasts that Douglas has done with the Mankind Project, where he goes into each archetype in depth and they really flesh it out. So I'd really recommend that. So yeah, Douglas, I want to wish you all the best going forward. I'm excited to see what you create next, and hopefully we can have another conversation at some point. Maybe you never know.
Yeah, it'd be great, Neil. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it, and you're a great host.
Thank you, sir. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy getting our 7 Insights newsletter. This is a once per month email where I share 7 of the most valuable insights I've uncovered in the previous 30 days. It includes book, podcast, and documentary recommendations, as well as questions and quotes specifically curated to help you live a more creative, intentional, and meaningful life. It currently goes out to over 50,000 subscribers each month, and if you're interested in joining them, you can sign up at 7insights.org.